everyone. Looking forward to another terrific Monday webinar, and today we are talking about pricing. So firstly, it's 12 noon here in Sydney. It's Monday as always, so if you could give me, if anyone is there and can hear me, give me a thumbs up to make sure that my sound is actually working. It usually is. There's not usually much of a problem with that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for taking the time to learn more about how money works in your business. And we truly know that when we know how money works in your business, it changes your life completely and forever. And you know, I was telling the story during the webinar I ran earlier last week, and one of the things was that I am so grateful that somebody in my very my early teens, mid-teens, I went to a workshop and someone taught me about how money works in business in my private life, and then I learned through my work how it works in business. So it just completely changes your life. So that webinar was called Easing into Understanding Your Financials in Your Business. And so it was called Easing Into because somebody had said to me, oh, enough with the fast track. And so, because I had called a previous workshop Fast Track, and so it's really this idea of easing into. And I know I talk quickly, but I really believe that one of the ways that we can come to understand this is through not pushing and not fast tracking, but in fact sort of easing into and sort of gently accelerating how we move towards the understanding. So I hope that makes sense. But if you'd like to see that recording, if you haven't already watched that, if you weren't a participant, you'd like the replay for that, just type replay in the comments and I shall certainly get it to you. So I can see here we've got a question, how do I make it better? How do we make pricing better? And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So thank you. I just want to let you know that at the end of that webinar last week, we had some pretty terrific question and answer. And so it sort of went down a couple of different areas that I hadn't decided to cover in the webinar. It was about stabilizing profit and it was about cash flow. And stabilizing profit is one of the things that led me to taking this discussion today about pricing. Last week we talked about discounting, and there was a terrific discussion afterwards talking about, you know, do you set your price at this and then do you discount it back to that? And you know, I don't know about you, but if I go into somewhere and I see the price was $1,000 and now it's $750, do you wonder, was it ever $1,000 and they're just reducing it? If you go regularly to the store and you see that you know, that's the price it is and now it's being discounted. So we talked a little bit about that last week. So, you know, is there genuine discounting or are we making up the discounting? Okay, so if you want the replay, tap replay in there. I know some of you are watching it at different time zones because we have a global, a small group in our Profit Lab, Healthy Numbers Profit Lab Facebook group, a private group, small and worldwide, which is so wonderful. So when it comes to thinking about pricing, the first question to consider is, where do you want to be? It's a bit like the discounting last week when we said about. So what do you want to be? Do you want to be high value and high price and exclusive and bespoke and be the person that is commanding a high price because the value you create for your clients, for your customers, is beyond anything that anybody could possibly imagine? Or are you keen to be in the cheap and cheerful section, because that works too? You know, there's lots of businesses really doing well in the cheap and cheerful section. So I think the way you make it better is to first off decide where you want to be. And so I want to give you a good example. So say there's a place where people are traveling and there's no water for miles, and you find a way to take bottles of water that you pay 25 cents for, and you go and set up a stand somewhere and you're able to sell them for $2.50 or even $3, because it's a long time since anybody was able to get water. And so when they get to you, they go, I'll pay any price. I would give you any amount of money for this water. And so you have this exclusivity, you are the only one doing it, it's incredible value. So then what actually happens in business is someone goes, there's an idea, I'm going to copy that. And now you have two people selling water. So the 25 cents purchase price, now we're not getting $2.50 or $3, maybe we're getting $2 because the other guy puts his sign up and says $2. And then someone else comes along and says $1.50. And so now this is what we end up calling the race to the bottom. And you know, we end up with 4 or 5 different people selling water, and maybe everybody's just selling it at 25 cents. Maybe somebody's even selling it less than 25 cents. Now you're not only not making money, you're actually losing money because the 25 cents covers the cost. So the first thing we need to do is decide where we want to be in the pricing model. And then how much do we actually need to charge to cover our costs? And that was one of the things we talked about in that webinar, is how do you know how much your total expenditure is? How do you know how much revenue you actually need to make? Because there's 2 types of expenses, and that's what's in the webinar. So if you want to see that, click replay and I'll send you through that link. So that's an example of a product, and this is what happens not just in products, but it happens in services as well. I have worked with dentists who have worked in an environment where there's been a race to the bottom. There are some dentists start charging this much for a crown, and then before we know it, everybody's charging half as much and people are charging even less. So, dentists, it happens in Pilates, it happens in gyms, it happens in clothing, all of those kinds of things. The truth is, Apple, what do you pay for an iPhone? Like, I'm using my iPhone now. If anybody bought a new iPhone recently, just how much did you pay for that? And they have maintained that sort of pricing because of the value, because people believe in it, because people know that the product they get is exceptional and beyond anything that they would get. Or if you're a Microsoft or a Samsung person, the same thing there. You pay the price because you believe that the product is going to give you what you want. And the same thing happens with services. So I'm in the coaching business. I'm training, coaching, and I see it all the time. People selling coaching, selling programs for very high-end prices. So one of my mentors has increased their price from, I think it was $1,400 or $1,500 a month a year ago, and they've just done their last round of their offer of their program, and it's $2,500 a month US. And so they've grown that from $1,400 or $1,500 to $2,500, and it's because of the incredible value they provide. So whatever you're doing, what is it that you are doing for your clients? What is the value that they're getting? And the clearer you can be about what that value is, then the clearer you can do is how much you can actually charge for that. And there we go. Apple is very pricey, $1,700 for an iPhone. Isn't that insane? $1,700 for a phone. And that is because of everything that it is, and we do that. Okay, so one of my favorite models to think about is the hairdresser model. And I use this as an example when I'm working with clients. And I'm working with somebody at the moment who is just, absolutely going to implement the hairdresser model. Because what happens, you think about a hairdresser. So there's high-end, there's semi-smart scissors, and she's the guy, she's the girl who've got these beautiful salons, and you go in and, I remember going when I had really long hair and getting my hair cut really short because it's curly. I wasn't quite sure who to go to. And I went to this person, and I was the only person in the salon. And they chatted with me about my lifestyle. They asked me some questions about how I wanted, what I did, how I lived, how much time I wanted to spend looking after my hair. And they cut my hair short. And it was really successful. And I paid a phenomenal amount of money for that. But the service was beyond what you would get if you walked into any other salon and paid a regular salon price. Now, it wasn't so much about the herb tea and, the environment. It was partly the environment, but I was the only person there. And that person was completely focused on what I needed and how he was going to cut my hair. Now, there's other hairdresser models, Just Cuts, and I have to admit, at times I have gone to Just Cuts when I've just needed just a cut, and those people are incredibly good at cutting, and they might ask you a couple of questions, but they're more likely to, it's quick, you don't make an appointment, it's maybe $40 or $50 for the haircut instead of $500 for, that's not what I paid for mine, but you know that you can pay that. So think about that model, and what I'd like to ask you is, if you're listening to this, what is somebody that you have paid a phenomenal amount of money in your mind because of what they've actually done? So really think about it. Have you got a hairdresser? Have you gone to a physiotherapist? Have you gone to a dentist? Have you had your eyes lasered? I know somebody who was getting their eyes lasered. And did they want to get their eyes lasered by the person who'd only been doing it for a year or two? Or did they want to have it done by somebody who had thousands of them done and had a long reputation and charged 20 times more. So it'd be very tempting to still go with the lesser price, but what was the value of the higher price? And what is your unique? What is it absolutely unique about you that allows you to charge the price you charge? And when I think about me and the work I do is, I am unique in what I'm offering. There is no one else offering what I'm offering at the moment. There's no one focusing on business finances, on helping to educate business owners, small business owners, about understanding how money works in their business. There's lots of people crushing it, and there's lots of people, setting big goals. But, I am bringing a different voice. I am bringing 30-something years of experience and understanding to be able to share information with people in a way that is absolutely absorbable. None of my clients have ever walked away from sessions without knowing more about what they're doing in their business. And I have a client I'm working with at the moment, and we've been analysing some of her costs and analysing some of her reports. And she said to me last week, we had a session on Tuesday last week, and she said, this is the healthiest I have ever felt about how I understand what's going on in my business. And, we added up what she's produced in the last 6 months. We looked at which were her highest performing customers, who buys the most of her products. And when you analyze the numbers, it's not difficult. And, that's what I do. And no one else does this in the unique way that I do it. So that's my uniqueness. I know people say to me, Ingrid, you have a particular skill in sharing financial information in a way that is understandable. We've had this discussion a couple of times. Last week, the week before, we had a Q&A, and the comments in the discussion said, so clearly explained. That's what happened last week on the webinar. People said, this is so simple to understand when it's done in a way that can be understood. So that's my uniqueness. So find your uniqueness. What is it that you do in what you do that is your unique, that is the value that allows you to be the Sammy Smart Scissors of your environment, of your business, of your industry? Because you absolutely have to cover your costs. You absolutely have to pay yourself, whatever the amount that is, because you might at the beginning think, oh, it's okay, I don't really need to pay myself a lot. But over time, that wears us down. That gets us to a point, and there builds resentment to some people. If we've sold something that's less than it's supposed to be, and we end up doing the work for less than we think it's worth, it's super, super important to get our pricing right. And so that's a couple of things, like, where do you want to position yourself? What price do you need to charge in order to cover all your costs and make money and pay yourself? And then what is the hairdresser model for you? I call it hairdresser model because it's like, I think everyone gets that. Whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're getting a $10 barber haircut or you're a $60 haircut from the fancy barbers up the street. So does anyone have any questions? I'm just going to stay here for another few moments. There's a few people here. I know that you're watching live. Thank you again for sharing your 12 noon or your 2 o'clock in New Zealand, or your last night in the UK, or yesterday afternoon in the US, and I know that means Sunday afternoon. But if wherever you are in the world, I'm here to answer your questions. Type them in the chat afterwards if you're listening to the replay of this. I'm launching a program in February next month, towards the end of next month, launching a program that is called Accelerate Your Business Financial Understanding. So it's going to be a 6-week program. It's going to be a small group. It'll be a combination of group sessions plus one-on-one deep diving into your financials. So if you want a little bit more information about that, type Accelerate in the chat, in the comments, and I shall send you the link to that information. I want to be seen as premium, but I don't want to turn people off. Yeah, so it's about understanding the value. So think back to my example of when I went to that hairdresser, and I knew it was going to be an expensive exercise, but the way I was treated, the way I was made to feel, and this was before a whole lot of the social media that's available now, but the way the questions were asked, the way they listened, and every single one of you listening, no matter what your product or service is, if you give that sense to your customer or your client that you are absolutely listening to what they say, that what they say is important, that you're listening to it, that you're responding to it. And each person is their own individual. This mass emailing, this mass communication is very difficult for people to feel special and people to feel valued. So that's how you get to be seen as premium, by being premium, by absolutely being premium. And I would like to think that people, here in this group are feeling that, when you ask a question, I'm here answering the questions for you. Will people happily pay more Australian dollars over international? That's shifting. Thank you, Brett, for the question. That is super shifting because, everything that's happened in the last 12 months, we know that products that are coming from here, if they're being made, if they're unique to Australia, if they're, and I want to say something like, people who make Australian products understand what Australians need. And so somebody overseas might try and copy what we make, but it's never the same, is it? It truly is never the same. When an American tries to say g'day, it's not g'day, it's some kind of weird American version of it. When, somebody in Asia makes or in a cheap manufacturing country makes a replica, it's not the same. There's something about it that just has a tinniness, whereas ours is solid. So, what is it that you would say about your products that would make people say, this was made here, this was made by somebody who is part of our community, we're creating jobs for Australians, we're keeping things here. There's, that has shifted. 2 or 3 years ago, absolutely, people wanted the cheapest price, the lowest price. But now, because of the situation we're in, and the trade exchange and how slow some of that cycle, my sister, they needed to get a new dishwasher, and the top 3 brands of dishwasher, there's not one to be had in Australia. So the 3rd or 4th down the list of and they're still paying top dollar for that. So, you can position yourself the way that you want to position yourself for that product as an Australian product made by somebody who understands exactly where everything needs to be on that product. And I think, Brett, yours is the barbecue. An Aussie who's doing a barbecue has everything where it's meant to be, and it's designed so that it's easy to use because that's how Australians barbecue. And there's part of your pitch. What is it that you do? What is it that you have designed into that makes it different over a barbecue that might come from somewhere else, even if it's a copy? So hopefully that's helpful. I don't have the answers for all of this, but I certainly have some great questions and some ideas to help you sort through what is it, what are your customers telling you? What do they ask you? What are the questions people ask when they're searching for your products? What are they searching for? How can you give them more value for what they're actually purchasing? I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's helpful. So I know we've got a wide variety of people in this group, and certainly, but and if anybody else has any ideas to help each other, please do jump in and give each other ideas about how to position yourself, how to ask for your price, how to be confident that this is absolutely what you do, and this is why you do it, and this is the skills and the abilities and the enthusiasm and the value and the regard that you bring to it. How do we book you for a discussion? Just type discussion in the thank you. Just type discussion or discovery in the chat, and I shall come back with my calendar link. And it would be an absolute pleasure to do some of this one-on-one with people. So I think that's about it for today. Thanks so much for being here. Always a pleasure to see everybody. And do we have any other questions? I know it takes a little minute for it to come through the internet, and I shall just wait for another little moment. And it's a short week for some people this week. I know the US had a holiday last week. Australia has a public holiday this week. And everyone's easing back in. The kids are going back to school. Everybody's getting stuck into things. Folks seem to ignore Facebook-sponsored ads. Is there a better way to get ads to folk? Brett, it's a great question. So Facebook ads is a whole science. From my understanding, is that it is worth experimenting with different and maybe this is a discussion you and I could have one-on-one, but I don't pretend to be an expert on Facebook ads, but from what I can understand from those who are successful, is that they have a small amount of money that they use day after day after day, and they target very, very succinctly to their target audience. So you have some profiles of the sorts of people who buy from you. There's also something that you can do in Facebook where you can use the emails of the customers that you've got, and you can create a list of those, and you can add them into your business Facebook account, and then you can start to use that audience as a template for the type of people who are on. So those profiles, and often, they are, if that's the one you're sending a receipt to, often that is the true email address, which may well be the same email address they use for Facebook. So Facebook then matches that email address with characteristics that they know about that person. And when you run ads based on that group of people or that list of people, then that tends to have a lot more success. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they were running a yoga, 6 weeks yoga sessions, so 6 weeks of yoga sessions, and they paid $5 a day for all the days leading up to however they were, and had nearly 100 people sign up based on seeing the ads. And they had used that method of using the email addresses, and so they were able to put their ad in front of people who had either known them in the past or people who were interested in the same things those people are interested in. So that is one of the ways that Facebook ads can work. I don't pretend to be an expert in Facebook ads. I haven't spent a lot of time and energy in Facebook in terms of ads, but I know from people who use it and use it successfully, this idea of a small amount of money, seeing what gets the traction, and there's something about the algorithm gets to learn. So people do 2 or 3 days and they go, that didn't work. Or they might do a week and they say that didn't work. Or they do one and then they do another one. And so, but again, what's catchy? What are you saying in the Facebook ad? Yeah, so I know there's lots of people scroll past because they're not interested. But if somebody's interested in buying what you're selling and they see the right ad, then they are going to stop on it. And so, but we know that out of the 100% of people, there's only something like 1 or 2% of people are actually ready to buy right now. There's something like, I think the statistic is about 15 or 16% of people are thinking about that they might like to buy. Then there's this whole group of people who are not even thinking about it. And then there's a group of people who are never going to buy that. So am I ever going to buy a barbecue? Highly unlikely. So if I saw your ad, I would scroll past it. But my sister, who lives in Queensland, and maybe she's thinking about making some changes to her garden, then maybe she might be looking for a barbecue. So, it's again, who is looking for what you're selling, and remembering that it is actually only 1 or 2% of the whole population that's actually looking to buy right now. You think about someone who's, I'll give you an example that somebody gave me once, which makes total sense for this, and I know we're going a lot longer than usual. I haven't got a clock actually, so I don't know. So an example of buying a car, a bigger car. And so if a family doesn't have any children yet, or they have one child and they're doing with the car they've got, then they're starting to think about the next car. And they might spend a year doing research. They might spend 2 years doing research. And then when they're actually ready to get the car, now they go shopping. Now they want to talk to somebody. Now they want to talk about price. Now they want to talk about features. But they've done their research maybe for a year or two. So they're in that gap, that big gump in the middle that says, yeah, it's kind of thinking about a car. So I hope that's helpful, Brett, because, when you think about who is actually in the market to buy what you're selling right now, it's this tiny, tiny, tiny group of people. What you're doing with some of your ads is warming up this group that might be looking for something in the next 2 to 3 or 4 months. And so it's a long game. It is a long game for people. And they go, there's that ad. I've seen that ad a few times. Yeah, that company must be good. They're still around. I saw their ad last year. And so that's how we build our brand and we build our reputation. Okay. Give me a thumbs up, please, if that makes sense or if that's sensible. And I think it's time for everybody to get off this, get off this live and go and think about what is your value, and what are those key things? Just go back to the conversations you've had with customers in the last couple of months or the last couple of weeks. You know, what are the things they're saying to you about what they need and what they want? Alrighty.